Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on evaluating the efficacy of coaching. Definitely excited to have all of you here. Some of the names I'm seeing are familiar and some of you are new to me. Because of the number of people on the call, the way we manage sound and feedback is to keep you in mute. And we also want to make sure we're answering your questions. So a few of you submitted questions ahead of time. We will be addressing those as we go through the webinar today. And for those of you that have additional questions, absolutely feel free to jump in by typing those into the question panel. Just enter them there. Every once in a while, I've got somebody that would rather ask the question live, and we can do that too. The way to manage that is if you raise your hand, and the way you raise your hand is next to in the control panel, there's a picture of a hand. It's got a little green arrow. If you click on the green arrow, that means your hand goes up, and I can unmute you so you can come on live and ask your question, and we can handle it that way. So, given that we have just a quick 30 minutes, let's jump right in. What is the agenda today? Where are we going with this conversation? So, in terms of evaluating the efficacy of coaching, you want to start with your objectives. You definitely have value in considering the qualitative measures. We'll talk significance of measuring the ROI, planning and conducting the evaluation, and then discuss some resources. And when we discuss resources, I do have something I'm going to give you just because you've invested part of your day being here with us, and I thank you for that. Definitely appreciate the privilege of the time with you. Okay, objectives of coaching is going to be our first topic, and at the same time, one of the questions that actually came in ahead of time is, okay, help me really understand coaching. So let's set that up first. The International Coach Federation, which is the gold standard in the coaching profession and our self-regulating body in terms of being coaches, defines it this way. It is a strategic partnership in which the coach empowers the client to clarify goals, create action plans, move past obstacles, and achieve what the client chooses. So the definition here really sets us up in terms of, okay, is coaching effective? It's really based on whether it's true coaching, because when it is a partnership and the coach is truly empowering the client so that they clarify their own goals, create their own action plans, figure out how they will move past their obstacles and achieve what they want, that's where you get the efficacy of what we do as coaches. So, starting with the objectives. In this space, talking about coaching goals, coaching measures, factors, doing the actual measuring, and then evaluating the measures, considering when to measure. So, starting with the objectives. Where are we going with this? What is the objective of coaching is the very first consideration. So, for example, sometimes organizations say, hey, we want a bottom line impact here, dollars. Some people say we want to start creating behavioral change. We're looking at the big picture. And in keeping with that, very often the cultural change. Hey, as an organization, we realize we're going to have a better bottom line when we change our culture. So that's the primary objective. It does vary. Now, consider also the objectives for measuring the ROI, measuring the efficacy of the coaching relationship. So sometimes it's to, prove, hey, this is a good tool and it works. Sometimes it's, we want to improve, because by measuring the efficacy of coaching, we have the opportunity to figure out where to improve it. And then we want to learn. We can evaluate this and consider what the learning opportunities are. So knowing both your objectives for doing the coaching and for doing the measuring. Okay. If you're going to evaluate the efficacy, what exactly are you going to measure? So, for example, are you measuring actions? Are you measuring feelings? Are you measuring the feedback or the dollar impact? What's important to the organization? And of course, part of this goes back to the reason for having the coaching. For example, if they're looking for a bottom line impact, then that's what they're measuring, the dollar impact to the organization. This is fairly common in the corporate space. Companies spend a tremendous amount of money on coaching, and they want to know, hey, is that investment worth it? So it's important to them. Alternatively, when you have organizations with an objective of cultural change, they're going to talk feelings that people have. What's happening? How is it changing? Alternatively, behavioral change. Individuals that are leaders in the organization changing what they're doing and how they're doing it. So you have different options. And of course, the way you measure changes based on what you want to measure. Now, factors that influence measures. It'd be really nice to say, hey, it's all across the board equal, and the reality is there are a lot of things that play in to what the outcomes are. So being aware of those factors sets us up to both work with them and make sure we're more successful in our process. So first off, the setup of the coaching relationship. For example, best practices say where the client has say-so in who their coach is, the matching process, you're going to have a better relationship. The logistics of it. How are they meeting? Where are they meeting? What's their process? What is their setup in terms of their agreement for what that coaching relation is? What is the setup in terms of the ethics and explaining the confidentiality components, etc.? This makes a huge difference. For example, if a client knows, yeah, this coach is part of the International Coach Federation, they have a code of ethics that talks about confidentiality and protecting the confidentiality of that individual, then they're more comfortable actually engaging in the process. So the setup of the relationship is significant. Another significant factor, of course, is the coach training. There are a lot of coaches that have no training. They have great experience in other areas, and they're missing out on the coach training. So think about it this way. If a dentist says, okay, now I want to be a doctor. Well, I've already gone to medical school. I'm already a dentist. I don't have to go back to school. I can just transfer my skills over. And if you're going to go look for a doctor, is that going to cut it for you? So it's the same thing with the coaching. Having the training and then, of course, experience in a similar setting or background. That's huge. So big factor in terms of outcome. The next, of course, is the client themselves. Are they coachable? So some clients say, you know what, I'm perfect the way I am, happy with where I'm at, things are going along fine, it's all good, and forget it. They're really not in a coachable place. Alternatively, you have clients that say, yeah, no, I really do want to continue learning and improving and growing. And the more they're invested in that, the more coachable they are as an individual. Another factor is the organizational support. So sometimes that comes in terms of just buy into the coaching process itself, and sometimes it's in terms of the resources, what is available to the people that are involved in the process. So having the organizational support. And there are external factors. The environment. Think about major events in the world, what's happening and how does that affect this organization and what's going on there. There are some things outside of the control of the people who are setting up and participating in the coaching process. So having an awareness for that. Then it's considering, okay, what exactly are the reasons for the resources for measuring? So how are we going to do this? It takes money to measure the efficacy. It takes using current systems or tools or potentially adapting those systems or tools. So the great news is there are a number of organizations that already are using different measures. And it's taking those and using them as a baseline or adapting them for the coaching process. Alternatively, new systems or tools. Perhaps the organization is using, for example, a 360 evaluation, and perhaps they're not. How are they tracking productivity numbers, etc.? So different options. And then, of course, it takes staff. It takes people to do the measuring. So having the financial resources, having the systems or tools in place for doing that, and the people who actually do it. Setting up a coaching relationship, of course, before you even start the coaching relationship, you're answering the question, how is the baseline determined? So as you plan evaluating the efficacy of coaching, be considering, okay, what's our starting point? Then developing, we talked on the objectives, where are we going with this? How are we measuring it, etc. And of course, you want to consider, gee, what does it mean to people to actually have that measure? So for example, a sponsor, which is the company paying for the coaching relationship, how are they going to evaluate it? We talked about a common tendency being looking at the bottom line dollar impact. So that's what they care about. Now, how about the client, the person being coached? How do they evaluate it? Well, on the front end, it sets them up in terms of, gee, do they really believe and engage in the process? So their level of coachability. And then in terms of, gee, what did it do for me personally? That makes a difference to the client. Now the coach, how do they evaluate? Well, part of it is, okay, what am I doing as a coach and how am I going to improve that as I continue to move forward? And what do these numbers mean to me as I do build my coaching business? So different objectives in evaluating the measures on the front end. Consider also, when exactly are you going to measure the outcomes? So in coaching relationships, sometimes you have people who say, well, we want to be measuring during. That makes sense. Hey, how's it going? Do we want to adjust along the way? And so that's a consideration. Alternatively, you have people say, okay, as soon as we finish the coaching relationship, let's measure. Or 6 months later, because it takes time for that to continue to be implemented and make a difference and have that kind of bottom line impact. And the same thinking behind a 12-month time period. Now, of course, one of the options is using several different times when you're doing the measure. That's going to go back to your resources, because the financial resources for doing the measure determine how often you have the opportunity to measure. Okay. When you're going to measure, there are qualitative considerations that make a difference. Qualitative impact in the coaching that makes a difference on the bottom line impact. We'll talk skills. What is the process? And that makes a difference in measuring. And then, of course, the motivations. So let's set this up. First off, qualitative measures directly impact the quantitative measures. Think about coming at it this way. Start out by defining quantitative goals. Okay, we want to increase sales by this percentage. We want to decrease turnover by this percentage. We want to increase our measures of productivity or engagement by X numbers. So what are the quantitative goals? If you're looking at individual behavior change, for example, this may be as simple as, okay, we're going to do a 360 before and after, and we want to improve their scores on the 360 by X percentage. Then, once you know the quantitative goal, hey, this is what we want to achieve, what's it going to take to get there? So, for example, we say, oh, yeah, we want to improve the sales numbers. Great. We want a bottom line impact in how much we're selling. So we know the number. Let's say as an organization, and I'm going to use really easy numbers, let's say we make $10 a year, and now we want to make 100. We want to multiply tenfold. That's our goal. Okay, what's it going to actually take to get there? Or if you have an individual salesperson, they're meeting 80% of quota. We want them at 100%. Okay, what specific skills and behaviors will it take for them to get to that 100% of their sales quota goals? And once you know the skills and the behaviors, you're setting yourself up in terms of actually evaluating how much the coaching is making a difference. what is the impact of the coaching relationship? So let's do some examples. In terms of qualitative measures, the behaviors, the actions it's going to take, we call this very often soft skills. What are some of the soft skills that come up frequently? Well, examples. Communication. This is a big one in almost every area in terms of what's going on inside of an organization. People skills. How are they interrelating to the people they supervise, to their colleagues, to their customers? So their ability to be effective in those relationships. Conflict management. Conflict is just a normal part of everyday functioning. The question is, how effective are they on managing it so it's a positive opportunity, a benefit to actually have that conflict? And alternatively, public speaking. Very often, getting them out in front of people doing the presentation, for example, in a sales opportunity, it takes public speaking skills. The negotiation almost goes without saying in terms of that conversation and meeting those goals. Decision-making ability. Sometimes decisions are happening right now, and if we don't make a decision right now, that basically becomes the decision. So what is that individual's ability to think quickly and act quickly? Strategy development, their big picture thinking. Leadership ability, think about the cultural change we mentioned earlier, or simply their ability to step out and take the lead in that effort for achieving those sales numbers, as well as inviting other people along the way with them. So there are different skills that influence the quantitative measures of a coaching relationship. The process itself, how exactly are you going to measure? So consider this. Individual beliefs support or determine their behaviors, which in turn determines outcomes. So, for example, if an individual says, you know, I'm a good listener. Okay, as far as they're concerned, how they listen is working and they're done with where they're at. Is that really the effective communication skill that they believe it is? Because it's impacting their outcomes. A lot of this is going to go back to the coaching relationship itself and the skill of the coach, because here's what happens. In that relationship, you're listing what are the desired skill development areas. And then your second step is going, okay, here's where they're at currently, and here's where they want to be. Back to that measure. What is the baseline? What is the goal or the objective? And then having the conversation, the coach and the coachee, their client, what are the reasons the current level is where it's at? Is it in part, hey, that's as much training as I've got? Is it in part their belief system in terms of where they're at? What's behind it? And then what are the benefits to actually changing it? Think their motivation, because creating that change is going to take effort. And are they willing to? So it starts with the awareness of the benefits, and then the coach asking that individual their internal motivation. What does it do for you personally? What does it mean to you to create that change? And from there, you're setting them up for effectively strategizing and planning the process. The coaching relationship, the process that happens in that coaching relationship very much impact the qualitative, which in turn impacts the quantitative efficacy of the process, of the relationship. Okay, motivations in terms of the qualitative measures. For the organization, typically you're hearing revenue and you're hearing culture. Increasingly, companies are aware of the importance behind creating the culture in their workplace that actually supports the success of the organization as a whole. Coachees. So yes, very often they're bought in to what the organization motivations are. At the same time, what are their own personal motivations in terms of their opportunities, their success, etc. And of course, the coach has motivation as well. They like the idea of the measure because it goes to their very purpose for being there and doing the work they're doing. It supports what it is they're about. Now, when it comes to measuring the ROI, what does it really mean to people? The organization, the coachee, the coach, and then think also in terms of organizational metrics. So, jumping in terms of the organization, the measure of the ROI is creating a buy-in to invest in the coaching. It's justifying the investment when it has been made, and it supports an ongoing investment. It takes time and financial resources and manpower to manage a coaching program as well as to participate in it. Now, for an individual coachee, what does the measure mean to them? Well, it's a huge factor in their level of interest in participating. Some of you on the call are coaches. Think about it this way. Sometimes you're brought in to work with an individual and they're thinking, oh, I'm in trouble, and that's why they're bringing me a coach. And it's actually, no, this is the company investing in you. You just got the corner office with the window. They want you, and they're investing in you. So that makes a difference in how interested they are in participating, which in turn feeds into their willingness to make the effort and actually create the change, because ultimately the work for that change is with them, with the individual coachee, and it actually supports their motivation for getting the results. Now, for the coach, what does it mean to the coach? Well, opportunities. Think about it this way. As a coach, when we're out there talking about the services we provide, one of the things we're talking about is the opportunity coaching creates. Alternatively, think back to your motivation for becoming a coach, the idea of really helping other people and making a difference. So it goes back to the reason we do it through a coaching relationship is so that we empower others. And then, of course, it's a growth opportunity for the client and for the coach themselves. Organizations themselves very often have an inherent, hey, we measure. They're using metrics already. So, for example, they're already doing 360 evaluations. They're tracking productivity numbers. They're tracking levels of engagement. They're tracking turnover. They're tracking sales numbers. These are just a few of the examples of metrics that they've already got. They're already using. And obviously, it makes sense that if they're going to invest in coaching as well as these other tools, that they want to measure it also. It's part of how they're set up. Now, of course, ultimately, evaluating the efficacy about coaching is because the whole reason for coaching is creating the positive change. And when we evaluate the efficacy of it, we know, are we getting there? Are we creating that positive change? Okay. Planning and conducting the evaluation itself. So, talking what, factors, how, and then the use. So, starting with the what. What are you going to evaluate? Many of you are in the training space and perhaps OD, etc., and you're familiar with Kirkpatrick's model. So in Kirkpatrick's model, they talk about 4 levels. The first is the reaction. Hey, what's your reaction to the experience? So they're talking about it in training. We're going to apply it in coaching. What's your reaction to that coaching relationship and the experience? The next level is what did they actually learn? What behavior changed becomes the third level. And then what are the results, the outcomes through that? So determining what you're going to evaluate. And some organizations evaluate all of this. Some evaluate a few components of it. Think about it ahead of time. Where are you going with it? Then the evaluation itself, we mentioned earlier, is going to be influenced by some of those other factors. How are you going to account for the influencing factors? So, for example, the quality of the coaching relationship. The number one indicator of success in coaching is that coaching relationship, the rapport between the coach and the client. It goes back to how it's set up. It goes back to coachability of the client. It goes back to the coach training and experience. So the quality of that relationship. The length of time. Well, if there's a coaching relationship going on for a month or two, it's going to have limited impact in comparison to a coaching relationship that is 6 or 12 months. So considering the length of time is a factor. Then, of course, whether or not that individual is coachable. Are they engaged, or are they coming at this resenting, coming at it? The quality of the coaching itself, we talked about the coach really knowing what they're doing and having the level of training for that work. And then organizational support plays in. Does the organization provide resources that are appropriate to support what's happening? And in addition to that, as that individual is going through change and creating change, is the organization backing it up? And then, of course, accounting for the influencing factors of the outside environment. What's the impact of something that is uncontrolled in terms of the coaching relationship? Okay, so you're going to actually evaluate. What is your process for doing that? So yes, we consider the baseline and we compare it to the outcome. We talked about having the baseline right at the beginning of the conversation. Then the next step is, okay, how do we factor in these influencing factors? What level of impact did they have on what happened? How are we going to be aware of that? And then from there, of course, determining there are qualitative benefits. Very often you'll see when people evaluate the efficacy of coaching, they start assigning dollar values to those qualitative benefits. Alternatively, we mentioned earlier, assigning those qualitative benefits in terms of the percentage of impact or determining factor, if you will, in change in the quantitative benefits. And then, of course, you're quantifying the economic value. So what exactly is your formula? It does vary. The organizations, the very typical simple is we say, what's the cost of coaching divided by the value of the attributed outcome, and we have a percentage. The key is being the value of the attributed outcome. Are you going to look specifically just at the bottom line number change? Are you adjusting, and how are you adjusting for some of the other factors that we discussed earlier? And then, of course, if you're going to do the measuring, what's your application of the finding? How are you going to take the information gained from evaluating the efficacy of coaching and apply it where you are at, where you're working? So as an organization, it goes back to the ideas of learning and improving based on the information, as well as the ongoing investment in the coaching process. It's a determining factor. All of that plays in. Okay, that was a lot of information in a very quick period of time. So a couple of things to wrap up. There are lots of great resources available to you. Because of time, I'm going to mention just a few. The International Coach Federation, I mentioned that early on as the self-regulating body for coaching professionals. For those of you that are interested in the training behind the coaching experience, Center for Coaching Certification is a resource for you. For those of you that want consulting, training, or coaches that are available to do some of the coaching, the Center for Coaching Solutions is available. So very specifically, the International Coach Federation is at coachfederation.org. Lots of great information on their website. If you are a coach, absolutely essential that you're a member of this organization. Absolutely powerful in terms of what it does for you and the profession as a whole. As an organization, there's a ton of information here. They do a lot of studies, there's a lot of research, a lot of opportunities. Next, in terms of training, the Center for Coaching Certification is one of many options available to you. Of course, we hope that you're including that as you're doing your investigation when you're choosing a training program. The Center for Coaching Solutions is a resource for you in terms of consulting for starting and running a coaching program, in terms of training for the coaches, and in terms of having coaches available to you where you want to bring in other coaches. How is it a resource? Well, in terms of information, there's a couple of resources, and then, of course, the outsourcing. So, given that most of us like the idea of free resources, let's touch on those very quickly. There is a coaching blog available to you with new articles done every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I am currently planning to take today's topic and further expand on it in a blog series, for example. Next, every year we publish a new book. The chapters are written by coaches who have gone through this training program. It's a great opportunity to get a lot of different perspectives, a lot of insights into different ways for the coaching. And then another great opportunity for you, of course, is the webinars just like this one. Every month we do a free 30-minute webinar, and every other month we have a free 60-minute one. Now, we also want to be a resource if you just want to call or email and say, hey, I've got a quick question, just 5 minutes, that kind of thing. We are happy to be available to you for that reason. So feel free to reach out and call or email. Alternatively, if you want more information, for example, you're interested in the consulting, the training, or the coaching opportunities, we want to be available for that. And to support that, I mentioned early on, we want to give you something. All of you that are on the call, we want to give you a free consultation. 30 minutes, you get to use that time however you want. Maybe you've got a bunch of questions you want to ask and just get answers to. Maybe you want to explore different possibilities in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it. So we're going to offer you a free 30-minute consultation. Of course, for you, then it becomes choosing the resources, planning your process, implementing your strategy, and achieving the results. Our hope is that as an organization, we're there and we're helpful for you. I do want to share with all of you that there is a business development team available. We've got a couple of people, so depending on what you are looking for, in addition to myself being available, I do have others that are available to you for that consultation. So when you email or call and say, yes, I'm interested in 30 minutes, let me know what you're looking for, and I'll determine who's the best fit for you in terms of answering your questions, and we'll make sure you have the time to have a conversation with them and get those answered. I do want to thank all of you for being here. I appreciate your time today, your participation. Definitely excited, as I mentioned early on, having the opportunity with you. So for those of you that have other things scheduled, of course, we've used our time. Thank you, and please feel free to jump. For those of you that want to hang around, if you have additional questions, either raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type them in. And I am happy to hang around and answer those questions. I am getting the thank yous in the question panel, so I appreciate also your thank yous. Appreciate having you here, and thank you. I'm glad it was of value to you for those of you that are sharing that. So thank you all. A couple of new questions coming in here. So one of the questions, and this is probably coming from someone who is actually a coach, and they are asking, okay, so how do I use this information to be more profitable as a coach? Well, and it's going to go back to what it's actually saying to people. How is the coaching making a difference? What is the efficacy of it? And that, of course, influences their decision in terms of investing in the coaching. So initially as a coach, many of us use the studies that are out there. There's a lot of research that has been done on the ROI of coaching, and we use that as a general overview. As you build your own business as a coach, where you have the ability to start measuring, evaluating the efficacy, that's great for you, because in addition to the research that's available professionally to everyone, you've got your own specific outcomes and evaluations measured. Do keep in mind how you're doing that. You've got to be following standards appropriate for when you're involving other people, which is, of course, what you're doing. So great question there. I do have a question here, more information on coaching itself. What I'd like to do is, because of the Center for Coaching certification being the training side, Center for Coaching Solutions being offering the consulting, coaching, and training, I want to make ourselves available through that. Okay, great. Got your note. So yes, definitely we'll plan on that 30-minute consultation with you, answer some specific questions, and then build from there. Another question here on the ROI for coaching and getting more information on that. So yes, we had a very short time period today, quick run through of some of this information. Recommendation for you. Go on the internet, just open up a browser, whether it's Google, Yahoo, whatever you want, and do a research. Do a search for ROI of coaching, evaluating the efficacy of coaching, measuring coaching results, etc. You will see a multitude of sites, studies, resources, etc. And then, of course, I mentioned the International Coach Federation. They've got some fabulous resources for this as well. So great question. I believe at this time we've answered everybody's questions. I appreciate those of you who have stayed afterwards, stayed longer. Thank you so much for being here, and definitely looking forward to being a resource for you. So thank you, everyone.